Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So Kaz headed over to Twitter or X this morning, much earlier than usual to be totally honest, and went ahead and announced that 3 new cars are coming in a new update releasing next week to Gran Turismo 7. And as always, I'm going to take you through what I believe all of these new cars to be. But before we get into the video, I'm trying to get this channel to 60,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you do enjoy this type of content and you want to stay up to date with everything Gran Turismo related, then feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and turn those notifications on. Anyway, let's get to it. So within an hour of me waking up this morning, Kaz went ahead and posted these silhouettes to Twitter or X. Now, as we can see, they are in a much different style to the typical silhouettes we get. And in terms of the cars themselves, well, there does seem to be a very nice surprise at the front, and that is one of the most long awaited cars that is off of the leaked car list. Over on the right hand side, we do have what seems to be a very typical 80s boxy kind of shape of a vehicle, and at first I think a lot of people were along the lines that this is just another copy paste Levin, but I personally don't think it is. And then unfortunately over on the left hand side, what seems to be very much an SUV slash crossover shaped vehicle. Now, I'm going to be totally honest here, the car on the left, the SUV slash crossover shaped vehicle, was incredibly difficult to try and decipher what it may be, but I believe I've come to the best possible conclusion and as close as possible to actually guessing what this car may be, so I will talk about that last off. However, there is something to note when it comes to these silhouettes, and that is the SU7 Ultra, which was announced with the Xiaomi collaboration, is completely absent from this lineup, which is quite strange considering they made it seem like it was coming incredibly soon. Now, this has got me thinking, with that being the first Chinese car to be ever added to Gran Turismo 7, are they going to go that step further and possibly add in maybe a Chinese track to kind of go alongside it? It would kind of make sense since they're trying to make such a big deal of it. Now again, that is pure speculation, but one thing I did notice when I recently looked back at the SU7 trailer, maybe it's just how it's edited and filmed, but some of that footage looks very gameplay like. So if you go back and watch it, you'll probably know exactly what I mean on those certain parts. Again, that is purely just speculation on my part, and there is a possibility that I am completely way off target with it, but again, it just seems weird that the SU7 Ultra is completely absent from this lineup, considering the big deal they made about it at the World Series in London, and well, they seem to kind of hint that it would be in GT7 very soon, and really expected to be in the next update, but it's just not there. Anyway, let's get into the silhouettes. So let's begin then with the first car. We're going to zoom in on the front and center silhouette because I think this is perhaps the most exciting car that is here. However, I'll talk about the car on the right very soon. In terms of this one, it really has some very kind of aggressive boxy body lines, and if we look to the rear left of it, what seems to be a mud flap, and of course what seems to be a very wide bodied version of a vehicle. And this can really only lead me to one possible car that is straight off the leaked car list. Of course, I'm talking about the Lancia Delta HF Group A rally car. Finally, I'm pretty much almost 100% certain on this. Of course, if you kind of refer back to the silhouettes whilst watching this video, you'll sort of see the very boxy, aggressive shape, what seems to be a wide body on it. And of course, if you look at the top of the vehicle, you can see that very iconic sort of rear wing, which sticks up very high just over sort of the back of the car, which I think looks absolutely incredible. Of course, this is a Group A rally variant since we already have the road version in game. It's been on the leaked sort of data mine list for the longest time, and of course it has been in Gran Turismo games of old. It will probably arrive in a sort of fantasy version of the Martini liveries. Of course, they'll remove the alcohol sponsors and such because they kind of have to. For me personally, I've been waiting for this car for what seems like the longest time. It's been hanging around on that data mine list forever, and now it seems to finally be arriving in game. This will be an absolutely incredibly awesome car. It's a very special rally car as well, probably one of the most iconic of all time, if I'm kind of speaking full truth there. And of course, it now actually brings in the possibility to remake Sega Rally, thanks to the fact that we already have the Toyota Celica Group A rally car in game. So I honestly think when it comes to a lot of Gran Turismo fans, especially those of the older games, and of course me myself, I think this is an absolute win for Gran Turismo 7 and a much needed car arrival. Okay, so let's move in to the second silhouette. It's over on the right hand side. As you can see, we've got a very sort of boxy shaped road going type vehicle with a huge massive aerial or antenna sort of hanging over it, which is giving me massive 1980s vibes, you know, kind of any car in that area, very road going. And what I'm going to say is probably not a very expensive car of the time, which I mean it's not kind of a sports car or a supercar. As you can see, a very boxy shape. Now when it comes to this silhouette, on first kind of looking at it, it did very much give me Toyota Levin vibes, and I thought, well, is it possible we're just going to get a copy paste Levin? Now, the main reason I thought this was because I attended the Gran Turismo World Series in London earlier on this month, and outside the BBC studios was a Toyota BTCC Corolla, of course, of the sort of Levin body style. But upon comparing it, honestly, the image that I took compared to the actual silhouette just didn't match up at all. Of course, we can see that the front lip is far too extended, so I don't think it's a Levin. So what was next from there? So I stayed along the lines of Toyota and I went across to the AE80. This is a 5-door variant with a liftback. As you can see at the front, very closely resembles the Levin, which is why I sort of gravitated over towards this car. But again, after comparing it, it just didn't match up close enough for me personally. So I kind of then went off the idea that it's a Toyota at all. So after going off the idea that it was a Toyota, I started looking around the same time period, sort of early to mid to even late 80s, with that similar kind of body style. It's a very unique body style if you look towards the rear of the silhouette, and I stumbled across this, the Citroen BX, and instantly I sort of thought, well, this has got to be the one. It has the very distinct body style towards the rear, and of course that massive aerial slash antenna hanging over the car. So honestly, I think the car on the right hand side of the silhouettes may just be this. So I started doing some research on the Citroen BX, and honestly it brought back memories that I forgot I even had. Remembering when I was a kind of kid and saw one of these, I thought it was absolutely hideous. However, over time it has kind of grown on me, especially some of the more motorsporty type variants. Of course, some of the more sporty variants and kind of later models, I believe they are, do feature sort of the rear wing, which is completely absent from the silhouette, which makes me feel like this is probably an earlier model. Of course, the huge aerial slash antenna, almost lack of any rear spoiler, what seems to be on the silhouette anyway, so it matches up with more of a, you know, kind of basic model or a very, you know, much earlier model. So the third and final silhouette is definitely the most difficult to actually decipher. I've seen some people think that it might be along the lines of a hatchback, and I think you're completely wrong with that. I think this continues the unfortunate trend of SUV slash crossovers coming to GT7. Now, in terms of the manufacturer, it was incredibly difficult to decipher because they all look very similar, especially when they're in a sort of silhouette form. The only things I could really take away from this was the wheels, what seems to be some of the bonnet lines, the wing mirror, and of course the brake lights, which seem to sort of protrude out the back, as well as a very sloped rear angle on that rear window. And this sort of led me down the lines of maybe a more European design, and I think a little bit what I feel with the Citroen is going to continue to be a French manufacturer here. So in the end, I came to the conclusion that this must be some type of Peugeot. Of course, sticking with the French theme of the Citroen, I believe the SUV type vehicle to be some form of Peugeot SUV slash crossover. Now, because SUVs look very similar when they're under a silhouette, it was incredibly difficult to decipher and really find exactly what I'm looking for. The only things I could go off was the bonnet lines and the sloped rear of the vehicle before it sort of drops down again, as well as any protruding lights. And as you can see from the Peugeot 2008 here, it pretty much matches up, and I think this is quite possibly the vehicle that it will be with this update, unfortunately. At first I was looking down the lines of sort of American SUVs, maybe the Dodge Durango and Jeeps and such, but again they were just kind of too bulky and looked too large to really compare to the silhouette. I then went down the European route. I looked up some Volkswagens, of course Peugeots, and even some of the more Vauxhall models slash Opel to see if there was a possibility of that manufacturer returning. But again, none of them matched up exactly, other than really the Peugeot 2008. Now, of course, the other model that it could possibly be is the 3008, but I don't think it matches up as well, especially especially when it comes to the slope. It seems way too aggressive, the sort of drop on the back in comparison to the 2008, which sits quite nicely in line with the silhouette. I've seen a few of these over the years, and honestly, I just think it looks too big in person to kind of resemble that silhouette as well. So I don't think it's that. I'm genuinely kind of set on it being the 2008 rather than the 3008. So there we go. That is what I believe all three of the new cars coming to GT7 next week will be. I want to say a huge thank you to all of my channel members listed on screen now, and a huge thank you to all of you watching at home. Again, if you do enjoy this type of content and you want to support the channel that little bit extra, you can always feel free to become a channel member. It's massively appreciated and does help between uploads. Anyway, a huge thank you to all of you. If you think I'm wrong, then feel free to let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.